Namaste everyone. Welcome back children. Children, as we have picked up our topic, the solar system, and in part 1 we have talked about the sun and the various celestial objects that revolve around the sun. Today in part 2 we will talk about the two movements, that is rotation and revolution, which are shown by our earth, and how these two movements lead to the formation of days and night and seasons. So let us take up our topic, the solar system, part 2. So children, under this heading in part 1 we have already talked about the solar system, sun, planets, dwarf planets, satellites and stars. Today in this video session we'll talk about the movements of the earth, in which we'll study about the formation of day and night, and then we'll study how seasons are formed. So first of all, let us know the two movements of the earth, that is rotation around its axis and revolution around the sun. So when we talk about rotation, we should know that it is the movement of the earth on its own axis, whereas the revolution is the movement of earth around the sun in fixed path called orbit. So let us talk about revolution. Earth revolves around the sun in a fixed orbit. Earth takes 365 days, that is 1 year, to complete one revolution. So as you can see here, the sun is at the center and earth is revolving around the sun. And if we talk about rotation, we know that rotation is the movement of earth on its own axis. As the earth revolves around the sun, it also rotates on its axis. Earth completes one rotation around its axis in 24 hours. That is, it completes one rotation in 1 day. So now let us understand what is axis. Axis is the imaginary line passing through the North Pole, South Pole and the center of the earth. As you can see here, this is the North Pole, this is the center and this is the South Pole. So this imaginary line that passes from North Pole to the center to the South Pole is called axis, and axis of rotation is tilted at an angle of 23.5 degree. So that means the axis is not straight but it is a little tilted. And now let us talk about another imaginary line, that is equator. It is an imaginary line on the surface of earth which is equidistant from the north and the south pole. It divides the earth into two equal halves called the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So this is the equator, the imaginary line which divides the earth into two halves, that is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So children, now as we have understood the four important terms, that is rotation, revolution, axis and equator. And now we'll move on to understand how are days and nights formed. Day and night are caused by the rotation of the earth. Only half of the earth faces the sun while other half is away from it. The half which faces the sun receives the light and experiences day, whereas the other half experiences night. So as you can see here, while rotating on its own axis, the half of the earth which faces the sun receives the light of the sun and has day, whereas the other half which does not receive the light of the sun has night. As the earth is rotating, all parts of earth get to face the sun and experience day, and the other half gets to experience night. As the earth completes one rotation around its axis in 24 hours, each day-night cycle is of 24 hours. Or we can say that as it is rotating on its axis, so at one point of time, one half will have day, the other will have night. And this one rotation is completed in 24 hours. That is, the day-night cycle is completed in 1 day. And now we'll understand how are seasons formed. Seasons are caused by revolution of Earth and tilt of its axis. Earth's axis is tilted at 23.5 degrees, because of which the sun's rays fall directly in northern and southern hemisphere at different time periods. In June, rays fall directly in northern hemisphere. It has summer, whereas it is winter in southern hemisphere. As you can see here, in the month of June, what happens is the rays of the sun, they fall directly in the northern hemisphere because northern hemisphere is closer to the sun. It is tilted towards the sun, whereas southern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun. So the northern hemisphere will have summer season and southern hemisphere will experience winter season. Whereas in December, rays fall directly in southern hemisphere. It has summer, whereas it is winter in the northern hemisphere. So as you can see here, the southern hemisphere is now tilted towards the sun, so it will receive the light of the sun and it will experience summer, whereas the northern hemisphere is now away from the sun and it will experience the winter season. And we know that Earth takes 12 months to complete its one revolution. That is, after every 6 months, the rays fall directly on northern and southern hemisphere alternatively. So summer season shifts from one hemisphere to another after every 6 months, and so does the winter season. As you can see here, in the month of June, the rays of the suns are falling in the northern hemisphere and northern hemisphere will experience summer. But after 6 months, that is in the month of December, the rays of the sun will now fall directly on the southern hemisphere. That because it is closer to the sun. So southern hemisphere will experience summer, whereas the northern hemisphere will experience the winter season. But children, between the season of summer and winter, there is a transition period when the weather is neither as hot as summer nor as cold as winter. And what are these seasons? These are spring season and autumn season. In northern hemisphere where India is located, spring season occurs after winter in the month of March. That is, we experience winters in the month of December and spring comes in the month of March. That is after winter season. And autumn season occurs after summer in the month of September. We know that we experience summer season in the month of June and autumn comes after June, that is in the month of September. So children, now let us try to understand these seasons with the help of this diagram. We know that in the month of June, the sun rays, they fall on the northern hemisphere which experience the summer season. And then a transition stage comes when it is neither too hot nor too cold, and in the month of September we experience the autumn season. And then while revolving on its orbit around the sun comes the December. That is, now the northern hemisphere experiences the winter season. And then again a transition phase comes in the month of March when we have spring season. So children, that was all about the movement of the earth, and now let us revise some important terms. Axis of the earth. It is an imaginary line passing through the North Pole, South Pole, at the center of earth around which the earth rotates. Then equator. It is an imaginary line on the surface of earth which is equidistant from North Pole and South Pole. Northern hemisphere. It is that half part of earth which is to the north of the equator. Southern hemisphere. It is that half part of earth which is to the south of the equator. So now let us take up the recapitulation section. State whether the following statements are true or false. Seasons are formed due to rotation of the earth. That is false, because seasons are formed due to the revolution of the earth. Day and night are formed due to revolution of the earth. Again, that is false, because day and night are caused due to the rotation of the earth on its own axis. When it is summer in northern hemisphere, it is spring in southern hemisphere. That is again false, because at that time the southern hemisphere will experience the winter season. Spring season follows winter season. That is true. Axis of Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees. That is again true. Winters occur after 6 months of summers. That is also true. So children, now let us move on to the think and answer section. How are days and nights formed? How are seasons formed? How do seasons vary in northern and southern hemisphere? Write a short note on the axis of the earth and briefly explain equator and hemisphere with the help of a diagram. So I hope after going through this video session we are able to answer these questions, and still if you have doubts you can move back to the video slide numbers as mentioned here. So children, that was about the movements of the earth. So with this, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves.